You may or may not remember, 'cause it seems like a long time ago now, when the Tory leadership contest first started, and we were seeing the big dust-up between all those different candidates vying to see who will get into the final two. And of course, it ended up being, Liz and Rishi, which was almost what we predicted right off the bat. The only sort of outlier was we were seeing Penny Mordaunt doing shockingly well to begin with, which wasn't predicted to start with. Everyone thought, oh no, this is going to be sort of very quickly a 2-horse race, but it went from really being a 3-horse race until the end, where it became, no, everyone's going to back Liz in this case. And then it became sort of the Liz Rishi final two. But one of the interesting things that came out was after the first sort of big hustings, all the candidates were downplaying net zero, saying that they're going to abandon those pledges and that they're not going to follow through. And one interesting thing came out, that you had a lot of MPs right in this small group of sort of positive net zero Tories came out. I think it was in the Times. We even covered the piece I think they did for Conservative Home at the time, saying, look, we need to back net zero. If we don't, we are consigning ourselves to electoral oblivion by not trying to answer this challenge, these bring these answers. We are damaging ourselves. Look at all the benefits and how we led on COP26. Abandoning all those pledges makes us look really bad. And I very, very much agree with them for that. And I really wonder if this pro net zero lobby group, if they can actually get their act together, because it seemed that they didn't, if they could actually get their act together and have actually held on firm to go, look, we have X number of votes, and we are only going to give those votes to the candidate who backs net zero. That would have been very interesting to see how much they could have potentially changed, because you could have actually had a positive group in the Tory party, sort of being the opposite of the sort of the ERG, pushing for net zero goals, targets, and aims, which would have been very, very interesting. But unfortunately, we don't seem to have got that. Whether that will appear or whether this will become a thing, it's not really sure at the moment. They seem to have gone very, very quiet. However, it does seem that they are still around and sort of alive and kicking, so they're not gone yet. Because we're going to go over this piece in Conservative Home from a conservative Australian politician who is warning the current Conservative Party in the UK that if you do not have talk about net zero, or you oppose net zero, you're going to be consigning your party in the UK to electoral oblivion, which is kind of interesting. But will the Tories heed this call? I very much doubt it. I very much doubt that they will heed this call to action. So before we go have a look into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. So let's go over to Conservative Home today to cover this piece, because I thought this piece was sort of quite interesting when this came up. So this comes from the Australian politician Trent Zimmerman. So the title saying, "Let my electoral fate in Australia be a warning to Tories in Britain who oppose net zero." So he starts off with, "There is no credible route for centre-right parties to win elections without prioritising and earning voters' trust on climate change. Scepticism about action needed, or worse, doubting the climate science itself, is no path no party or even government can afford to tread. Voters want to hear politicians speak about climate change and act to stop it. And without strong party leadership on this issue, voters will look elsewhere." And I want to sort of put in my own point here. You've probably been seeing the recent poll numbers if there was a general election, and pretty much Labour would be at that point swept into power. The Tories would lose over like 100 and I think it was like 100 and almost like 130 seats they were set to lose. So that would be massively damaging, a massive loss to them. And of course, these pickups would certainly have come from the Lib Dems. They were picking up massive seats by looks of it. But also, interesting enough, the Green Party polled incredibly well, pulling in at about 7%. Now, they normally poll about sort of 3 to 4% in there, but it's the first time in quite some time that they've managed to go above sort of 5%. And there is a lot of belief in the party, in the Green Party, that there is an opportunity to actually get maybe one or two extra more MPs. Now, of course, I've said this before, the Green Party, when it comes to sort of local elections, do very well, but they never seem to be able to transfer that success at a local level to sort of a national level. They've never been able to really replicate that. So it could be interesting to see if we did have a general election, if they could maybe pick up one or two extra seats. That could actually be quite interesting to see where that goes and what that might mean, maybe for the sort of the future of the party. So anyway, he continues. So this reflects the simple reality that nations around the world are experiencing the impact of climate change. Theories of several decades ago have become a lived experience of the world's population as our climate changes. Here in Australia, the catastrophic bushfires a few years ago were a dramatic example of this. The Australian Liberal Party is learning the lessons of our defeat in May at national elections. And the North Sydney constituency that I represented from 2015, elected as an independent MP, running on a clear platform of strong climate action in total. We lost over 19 MPs to Labour, Green, and independent candidates, taking us out of government for the first time since 2013. While many issues led to our defeat in the minds of voters, unquestionably, concerns about our position on climate change featured large. And many voters, including traditional Liberal voters, wanted strong action to reduce Australia's emissions. Long-running divisions within the Liberal National Coalition have tarnished our credibility on these issues. By the time we resolved to achieve the national target of net zero by 2050, part of the coalition that represents the rich rural Australia, where the economy is based on fossil fuels, while other parts represented urban areas where voters demand strong climate action. While our then Prime Minister Scott Morrison managed to secure an agreement to reach carbon neutrality, the coalition's reluctance and splits were apparent to the community. And this, by the way, is what is exactly happening with the current Conservative Party. You've got those pro-net zeros and very, very much so the anti-net zeros as well. They are very, very much determined to get rid of net zero, calling it, as it's been dubbed, green crap. Even I think it was Liz Truss who said wanting to get rid of the UK's solar production capacity, which generates about 4% of the UK's electricity. Now, while that's not a lot, at this point in time, you do not want to be losing a generation capacity of about 4% of Britain's electricity. That doesn't make good, energy policy, economic sense, or even good, policy for the government to try and push. So he is right here that you are seeing this split. And I wonder now if those pro net zero groups, as we speculated at the beginning, will they now actually act? Will they form a group? Will they start coalescing? Will they start pushing for more pro net zero policies? This will be interesting to see, because this split will be very, very apparent if this starts to happen. And one of the things we've often said about in the sort of pro Boris ears will be the massive splits that start to become even more evident, and they were very much on display during the early stages of the Tory leadership elections, and they are now even more on display, and the differences between what Rishi Sunak is pushing versus what Liz Truss is pushing, and even what those different factions supporting sort of Liz Truss herself actually want. So you can see the cracks forming, as we've often talked about, this Tory civil war that is going to sort of engulf Liz Truss when she steps up, because all these different factions are going to want all vastly different things, and she's not going to be able to survive the push and pull that these different factions want for her to deliver. So anyway, continues. So while there were disagreements, The coalition's record on climate action in some areas was strong. In particular, Australia was a world leader in the department of renewable energy sources, such as solar. Renewables made up almost a third of our energy mix, and 1 in 4 homes has a rooftop solar panels. We developed several hydrogen hubs and invested 1.4 billion to make, store, and transport clean fuel. While we had some successes, more ambition was needed and expected, particularly concerning our medium-term national objectives. Unlike successive UK Conservative leaders, voters doubted how serious the Australian coalition governments were to meet that task, and too often we seemed hesitant to act. And bear in mind, this is where Conservatives are as well. Later on, this guy's going to start talking about, Conservative government should be, happy with their, climate success and what they did. But no, Conservative governments have time and time again, when it comes to the issue of climate change in this country, have been very, very hesitant to act. While promoting one thing at one point, while taking away another, he's going to mention David Cameron, but they got that wind power, and then very quickly they just went, nope, we're not going to do it anymore. So it's not, it's not as rosy as he makes it sound out to be. But I do think there's a warning about this, that voters do want to see this action on climate change is right. So anyway, he continues. We are not alone either. The Canadian Conservatives and US Republicans are, in part, struggling to win over the middle ground voters without serious climate change policies. And the UK Conservatives are one of the few centre-right parties anywhere demonstrating credible environmental leadership. And again, I'd very much disagree that the current Conservative Party is centre-right. They've very drifted, very, very much drifted to the right at this point. They aren't centre-right at all at this moment in time. Successive leaders, he continues, from Margaret Thatcher, who first raised the issue on the global stage at the UN in 1989, to David Cameron, who embraced climate action to win power in 2010, have prioritised the environment. Last year, Britain showed its leadership in the Glasgow COP and are eager to learn from this success as we seek to build our own return to government in 3 years' time. Again, that's climate action they used to win power didn't follow through on. And you've warned already in this piece that if voters do not see action, they will look elsewhere. And that is what we are seeing right now. So anyway, he continues, our policies and national circumstances are different, but there are similarities. We have overlapping histories for much of the last 2 centuries. We share values and political systems. In both countries, climate change is a top priority for our electorates. But while we hesitated over net zero, the UK Conservative Party embraced it with bold actions and bold words. Bold actions, certainly not. Words, almost certainly. Earning voters' trust and having a strong record of delivery from building new renewables to rolling out electric vehicles. While there is certainly a rollout of electric vehicles, this is more being driven by the fact that this is the way the industry is sort of going towards electric vehicles. So building up that infrastructure to be able to have people have electric vehicles is partly the reason why we are seeing that. There hasn't been a rollout of renewables. One of the largest renewable projects that David Cameron put forward to win power, as you put it, got completely canned by the Conservatives. So anyway, he continues. So while welcome the public pledge of Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have made to deliver net zero by 2050, they need to be mindful of our experience. And again, they've both publicly said that they're going to ditch those net zero targets. So much for learning from that experience. Like I said at the beginning, I do not think they're going to listen to this warning. They need to be mindful of our experience in Australia about what they need to be vocal to win voters' trust on this issue. If they want to win trust of the electorate, then they must learn from our mistakes and set their plan for bold climate action and shout about it with the same passion as their predecessors. Without environmental leadership, a centre-right political party today will struggle to build a winning electoral coalition. Climate change is not a left-wing issue that we can ignore. The vast majority of Conservatives feel a duty to protect our planet for the next generation, and Conservatives should debate the most effective way to reduce emissions and the right balance between the state and the private sector. They shouldn't question the need to act unless they want to get punished at the ballot box. And the UK Conservative Party has an environmental record that few other centre-right parties can actually claim. And this should be a source of pride. They cannot let net zero scepticism undermine that record and lose the trust of voters on the most salient issue of our times. And that is going to go completely unanswered. The idea that you think you can energize the Conservative Party to act, where you've got Steve Baker employing the exact same strategies he used during Brexit to start questioning net zero targets, has been a success. They are already there. They are already there. The Conservatives are fully on board to just start ditching all net zero targets and sort of get rid of the green crap. In fact, I think one of the very first things we will see will be a lot of the ditching of this renewable stuff, because one of the things that Steve Baker is heavily pushing is he's questioning the generation capacity of a lot of these renewable energy sources. Not that he's actually putting forward, oh, by the way, you say this wind power stuff or this, this solar power can generate X amount of electricity. Well, I question that. Not that he's putting anything forward, but he's just going, I question that. And this is something that if those green conservatives, those pro-green net conservatives actually want to focus on, then this is who they need to push back on and who they need to push back against. Because, it will be quite interesting. And could this be, we've speculated before about a move for moderate conservatives to actually get back into power and actually push back against this slide to the right and sort of try to at least regain the party and at least bring a bit more sense back to it. So could net zero be their way back into power for the more moderate conservatives? Because I'll tell you one thing that this guy gets wrong. The Conservative Party, at least the current Conservative Party, is no longer a centre-right party. It has drifted very, very far to the right, and it is certainly towards a very far-right libertarian bent. And if you know anything about sort of far-right libertarians, you know full well they are not on board for doing anything climate action as far as they are concerned. And this is very, very much reflected in the Conservative Party. You do not hear any Conservatives talking about net zero. Indeed, they want to abolish many of the targets they set at COP26 and just ignore as if COP26 didn't happen. But that's the crazy state we're in. So there is this warning from this guy, for this politician from Australia, is going to fall very much on deaf ears. I very much disagree with a lot of what he said in and talking about sort of the current Conservative Party, because while David Cameron did have a lot of green energy pledges back in 2010, they were very, very quickly abandoned or completely scrapped. We might not be in this bad of an energy crisis that we are if David Cameron had actually followed through on building on those massive offshore wind farm turbines. But of course, that didn't happen. And it's part of the reason why we're here today. We've seen the Conservatives get rid of a lot of our gas storage, which would have massively helped us, certainly at this time. But that's the current Conservative Party for you. So there's a lot, I think, to very much disagree with what he's saying about sort of the current Conservative Party, but that's the current Conservative Party. It is not the party that he describes in here. And could these moderates maybe win a path back to power, or at least try and regain some form of power in the Conservative Party on this net zero platform? It's entirely possible. But the first thing that has to happen is that they have to certainly lose the next general election, because this will certainly call into question their tactics. And if they lose again, then This will be a very clear message to the Conservative Party that their far right leanings and their actions are not helping them win elections. So eventually, the more moderates will use that opportunity to take back control and pull the party back to a more sort of right centrist ground. And maybe, at least some normalcy and start actually talking about, actual serious solutions in the party. But that isn't going to happen probably for quite some time. And during that time, opposition parties need to take a lot of advantage of that. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. I've just realized we've been quite long today, but never mind. As always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, we'll see you all next time.